Despite the focus of today's video being on a British vehicle, its origin can actually be traced to a Soviet creation. Our story begins, as with most early Western Cold War tanks, during the parade in Berlin following the Second World War. It's then that the Allies get their first look at the IS-3 with its pike nose armor and rounded turret. Although, as we'll discuss in a future video, those fears were largely unnecessary given the many flaws of that tank, it's safe to say the tank designers in the West had a bit of a brown alert moment following this. This would eventually lead to vehicles such as the M103 and Conqueror, as well as a range of much less refined designs. The vehicle we'll be looking at today definitely belongs in the latter category, with it featuring the largest tank gun ever created even to this day at an incredible 183mm. Known by many today by its unofficial name, Barn, let's take a look at the development that led to the Fv4005. If you want to get a taste of how today's tank would have performed on the battlefield, then you're in luck. Today's sponsor, World of Tanks, lets you take control of not just the Fv4005, but hundreds of other tanks from World War II and the early Cold War. Whether you like ambushing the enemy from the bushes with a tank destroyer, supporting your team as a light scout tank, or like me and prefer brawling it out face to face with the enemy in a heavy tank, there's something for everyone in this game. With 11 countries you can choose from, including a brand new Czechoslovakian line of heavy tanks, you're sure to find a vehicle to suit your playstyle. Click the link in my description and use the code on screen right now to get a special bonus just for signing up. Let me know what tanks you decide to go for in the comments below, and join my in-game clan, Cone, with a 0 if you play on the North American server. Now let's get into today's topic. Like I mentioned in the intro, the Fv4005 was conceived due to the emergence of the IS-3. Although some may argue the impact of the IS-3 can be a bit exaggerated, it is by no means incorrect. However, the 4005 itself was not the intended counter to the Soviet threat. That would be its older brother, the Fv215. Although I will return to the Fv215 for a full video, I feel that it's important to briefly discuss that design first, since the two are very much linked. Based on the Fv200 chassis, the Fv215 was intended to be a vehicle capable of delivering more firepower than its cousin, the Conqueror. Both tanks would have used the same version of the Fv200 hull, however the difference came in the legendary 183mm gun the 215 would be equipped with. This gun was the final product of a program started in the late 40s with the ambitious requirement for a weapon capable of getting through a 6-inch or 152mm armored plate sloped at 60 degrees from a range of 2,000 yards. The 120mm L1 used by the aforementioned Conqueror was not able to do this, but the ordnance quick-firing 183mm tank L4 gun finally met that need. This new tank firing Hesh would allow the gunner to get what we would today refer to as a mobility kill on any tank just by landing a single hit. So by now you may be wondering how any of this has anything to do with the 4005. At the time the 215 program was being worked on, the Cold War was in full swing. If these tensions finally led to full-scale conflict, there was no way the heavy tank would be ready in time to stop the Red Army. What was needed was a method of modifying vehicles already in the British arsenal to allow them to get the new tank-killing gun into battle. This is when the Fv4005 is born. Both the Fv4005 and Fv215 projects had originated from a meeting held on November 9, 1950 at the Ministry of War, although the 4005 would come slightly later. Many of you are likely already familiar with the fairly iconic look of the Fv4005, but believe it or not, that massive turret was not part of the original version. This single testbed vehicle, known as the Fv4005 Stage 1, was extremely limited in its abilities. Rather than a true turret, the gun was essentially just mounted to a Centurion hull on a platform, replacing the original turret. Although the gun was capable of fully rotating 360 degrees, it was limited to a much smaller firing arc due to the immense recoil. Elevation of the gun, however, could not be adjusted, with it just being fixed in place. Now some of you may be wondering, what could really be gained from this vehicle with it being so different from the final design? To get the answer to it, we can look at a description of what this vehicle was to be used for, taken from a 1951 Ministry of Supply Fighting Vehicle Division AFV development report. Here we get a much clearer picture of what exactly the Stage 1 was built for. Embodies a concentric recoil system and a mounting in trunnions on an undercarriage, the whole of which rests on the existing turret race rings. No crew protection is provided, and one prototype only will be made to obtain experience of firing such a large gun from a Centurion hull. It is anticipated that although all-round traverse will be possible, firing will be confined to a limited angle forward on either side of the fore and aft line. One additional thing to note about that report is that it also gives us the unofficial name for the 4005, this being Centaur. Back to what we just read though, to put this in layman's terms, the tank was really only built to give the engineers an idea of how the chassis would handle the recoil from the gun. This version of the tank did have something unique about it, as you may have noticed from the pictures. Unlike the Stage 2, it was equipped with an assisted loading mechanism. With the projectile weighing around 160 pounds and the propellant charge weighing another 73 pounds, it's clear why this was proposed. The system would move the significantly heavier projectile onto the loading tray, leaving the loader responsible for pushing it into the breech and then loading the more manageable charge. The downside of this system is that it not just took up a large amount of space inside the turret, but also was not a true autoloader like those on many of the French Cold War tanks. I'm not entirely sure what the fire rate this mechanism allowed the gun to achieve, but one source mentions a goal of 6 rounds per minute. Whether that was actually achieved, I cannot say, but without the aforementioned rammer, I find it unlikely. Bear in mind, this system has in the past been incorrectly referred to as an autoloader, which is an easy mistake, but a mistake nonetheless. Further changes were also made to the Centurion hull, including a recoil spade and travel lock for the gun. The recoil spade, as the name would suggest, was fitted to the rear of the hull and would be lowered into the ground. This was to help reduce the strain on the suspension from firing the gun by transferring some of the energy to the ground. As I said before though, this was little more than a test vehicle, and following reportedly successful firing trials, we move on to the more well-known version of this machine. The final tank in the FV4005 program was given the name FV4005 Stage 2. In total, 2 of these tanks were placed in production, although it is unclear if both were completed. Just like the Stage 1, the requirements for the Stage 2 are shown in the 1951 AFV development report. Embodies 2 conventional recoil systems with a hydropneumatic recuperator and an independent run-out control. Undercarriage similar to above, but of fabricated construction. A superstructure for crew protection will be provided, but weight considerations will preclude more than a limited degree of splinter protection. A sight is being designed in which the body is fixed with relation to the gun mounting, and internal moving parts apply angle of sight, target elevation, and correction for trunnion tilt. The range scale is visible in the sight eyepiece. Layout designs have been prepared and details will be completed shortly. A prototype should be available by March 1952. Putting that in layman terms again, this essentially called for a few improvements on the original design, as well as the most major change, which was the addition of an enclosed turret. However, this turret was not like other tank turrets of that time period, with its armor only being thick enough to stop artillery fragments or small arms fire. Although that may seem like a foolish idea considering the turret size of the FV4005 Stage 2 made it the tallest combat vehicle Britain had ever produced, it was not intended for the front line, so the armor would likely have been sufficient for its role as a support tank. This made the 14mm plates making up most of the turret a slightly more logical choice. Not to mention the goal was to have a 50-ton tank, so adding thicker turret armor would quickly have both reduced the turret interior space and added weight. Other changes to this version include the recoil mechanism, with it being replaced with a hydropneumatic system compared to the original concentric system which had previously shown issues. Another change was the removal of the mechanical loader. This was likely to conserve space in the turret or due to the mechanical system not working as well as was hoped. To replace it, a second loader was added to the crew, bringing the total to 5, with 4 in the turret and the driver in the hull. I can't imagine there would have been a long waiting list to become a loader on one of these tanks had they entered service, although I guess loading 160-pound shells all day would certainly make for a solid workout regimen. Another reason for the removal of the mechanical loader could also have been to allow more storage for ammunition. Even with such thin armor and a relatively empty turret, there was still only space for 12 rounds of ammo. Just these dozen projectiles would still add just under a ton of weight to the tank, plus an additional 900 pounds for the charges. To keep the gun fed, it was planned for supply trucks to continually provide shells to the tanks during combat, offsetting the limited onboard supply. These shells would be restocked through a large door in the rear of the turret, making the job of reloading at least a bit less of a hassle. There was also a winch and rail system which added a bit more assistance for the task. Moving on from the gun, we can take a look at a few of the other features this version was equipped with. 2 hatches were added to the roof, which each also received a periscope in front of them. These would be for the gunner and commander, with the 2 loaders using the rear door if a rapid escape was necessary. On the gunner side of the turret, there was also a boxy extension which contained the gun sight. Just like on the Stage 1, the tank retained the travel lock for the barrel as well as the recoil blade on the back. Additionally, it was now equipped with a manual winch above it for raising and lowering the blade. Interestingly, unlike most British tank destroyers, the 4005 was actually equipped with a machine gun. In March 1956, the Stage 2 was subjected to firing trials with mannequins used in place of the crew. A total of 150 shots were fired, which showed no harm to the mannequins, however they did produce some potential changes for the machine. Unfortunately for these unique tank destroyers, this was not their future, and with the end of the project coming in mid-1957, none of these alterations were ever completed. Advances in tank ammunition as well as anti-tank missiles had made the massive and frankly impractical 183mm tank gun obsolete. One of these missile projects, known as the Malkara, was actually in development alongside the 4005. It's no surprise that a more flexible and cheaper alternative would end up winning in the end. The Fv4005 still remains the tank with the largest armament intended for an anti-tank role, and with modern MBTs to this day only just starting to adopt 140mm guns, it's likely to remain that way for the foreseeable future. So what remains of this program today? Following the trials, both the Stage 1 and Stage 2 were dismantled with the hulls used for other programs. The 183mm guns are said to have been sent to training centers, with the Stage 1 seemingly disappearing later. As for the Stage 2, a turret remained for years near Bovington before eventually being joined to a Centurion Mark 8 hull. Although this may not be a fully accurate restoration similar to the remaining KV-2 in Russia, it at least helps to document this tangent from more traditional tank design. Whatever happened to the other Stage 2 prototype said to have been completed is unknown, but it was likely scrapped eventually. The remaining tank now stands as a gate guard outside of Bovington, where it will hopefully remain in safe hands for generations to come, although it hopefully can find a home away from the elements in the near future. Let me know what you think of this tank design in the comments down below, and make sure to subscribe to the channel for more videos like this one. I want to give a special thanks to Ed Francis from Armored Archives for his help on this video. He has a video on his channel talking a bit more about the 4005 and other projects, so if you want something to follow this video, I'll put some links to that in the description and at the end of the video. Thanks once again to World of Tanks for sponsoring this video. Be sure to check the game out using the link in the description and that code for some extra freebies. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.